Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J Reels Podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Hope you all enjoyed your Christmas day, a happy Hanukkah, and today is Kwanzaa. But the Grinch has just walked into the building. Oh yeah, this one is going to have a bit of a spicy, cranky feel, which would make for a very interesting hour or so, as this is the J Reels Podcast with your host, J Reels. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And yes, I am in a very Scrooge-like, Grinch-like mood. And there's a lot that I need to get off my chest. And I am going to be taking shots left, right, up, down, sideways. Not because I'm a bitter and embattled sports fan after what I've witnessed, more so over the last 24 hours than pretty much the last 3 days. But I could also throw in what happened there Monday night when it comes to my hockey team. But I'll spare that for later on. Because although my Christmas Eve and Christmas Day was fantastic, spent it with my in-laws, my wife, puppy, had a great Christmas Eve dinner and a fantastic Christmas brunch, squeezed in a couple of Christmas movies along the way. But I have to say that even with all that, there is going to be from the happy side of the holiday to the unhappy side. And just like as I mentioned, whether it's me gonna come out and be bah humbug for the next hour, so be it. You're just gonna have to deal with it. But a lot of truth is going to be in what it is that I'm gonna have to say here. And I'm going to start off with the NFL. Obviously, the two games there yesterday, and I've talked about this ad nauseum. And I even made a vlog about it sometime, maybe 8-9 months ago, when I talked about how I am down on the NFL, about 7 reasons. And I may be in the minority when it comes to this. And I understand that, and I'll take full ownership and responsibility for it. But I would think that there's a faction of people that may agree with me. Although I know there's an army of football fans that would say, J Reels, just shut up. You're the old man, get off my lawn type of attitude, which I understand I can have that from time to time. And I'm trying to be a little bit flexible. But based on what I've witnessed here, I cannot be flexible when it comes to the NFL on the whole, as they are cannibalizing their own sport. As we've seen here over the last few years with these networks and streaming and so many mouths to feed, where you have 2 games on Netflix that were introduced for the very first time, and the 2 games were just awful. I don't care if you're from Kansas City or Baltimore and enjoyed those victories yesterday, or just the casual fan that had nothing else to watch besides the NBA, which kudos to LeBron James that says that he loves the NFL, but Christmas Day is the NBA's day, and I get it. Ratings and popularity aside, that is not the case, but really we know that Christmas Day does have a more feel for the NBA fan than it does for the NFL fan. But with those awful games, and even Beyonce couldn't save the NFL yesterday, despite the fact that she was good in her halftime, I got to give it up, and I'm not a Beyonce fan in the least. But with those 2 awful games, the games on Netflix, a game on Amazon Prime tonight, 3 games on Saturday, a slate on Sunday, which is absolute boredom, and then a Monday night game, it is oversaturation to the T. And quite frankly, I've had enough of it. The days of Sunday at 1 o'clock and even 4 o'clock, where now it's 4:25, those special NFL days are gone. Because everything is just so spread out. Everything has to be for this streaming service, for this network, for this channel, it's just utterly ridiculous. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm sure you can see my facial expression. I'm sure veins are popping out of my neck, etc. But the bottom line is that I am tired with the NFL just trying to jam all these games down our throat. And I get it that people cannot get enough of the NFL. And I know that its popularity is bigger than it's ever been. And the Super Bowl, you could have Carolina and the Jets playing the Super Bowl and it'll still attract 100 million people. That's why you know the shield is bulletproof. And I get it. I've been paying attention. But you know what? I've had enough. Because watching those games yesterday, I didn't really watch the Baltimore-Houston game because I already knew from the jump what that game was going to be about. Because the Texans, and I'm going to get to them in a minute, but I had to start off this diatribe with the NFL and just being sick of having all these different games that are on that I have to almost have appointment television. Seattle, Chicago, I'm sorry. I know Chicago's fighting for a playoff spot, but I'm not going to tune in. And that's not because of the matchup. That's not because of the teams that are involved. It's just I have no interest. And generally in the past, I would have an interest. I'd be like, you know what, let me clue in. Let me see what's happening here. No, I've had enough. They're just knocking this over your head, and we get it with gambling, and I know fantasy's over with, but with the online betting and in-game betting and all that, that's why football is paramount. It's king. We understand. And I'm just regurgitating a lot of things that I've said before, but I've had enough. And this is where the Scrooge is coming out. So I had to start off with that just to set the stage for yesterday's games, because if you watch those games, they were just absolutely brutal. And this is coming from two teams that were at home that were no-shows. Generally, it's the team that has to travel to that city and play on the road that usually has the scenario where they're behind the eight ball. But that was not the case. You would have thought that these teams had literally 10 days off before these games yesterday, especially the road teams. And I'll start off with Kansas City, Pittsburgh. Let's go team by team here. The Kansas City Invitational has already begun. And who's going to beat this team? I understand, as I've talked about on several podcasts over the last few weeks, this team has been playing with fire. This team has been playing on the edge, squeaking by and eking by these games by the hairs of their chinny chin chin. But here they are at 15-1. We were looking at this team barely beating Tampa, barely beating the Las Vegas Raiders. Denver, if they didn't block a kick there, they would have lost that game. We could go through all these games that I've mentioned here if you've listened to this podcast for the last 4 or 5 weeks. And you would think this team is on the cusp of just being picked off by at any moment. But they are 15-1. And they're going to go to Denver next week, and they'll probably rest everybody. And Mahomes with his ankle, the guy's bionic. I mean, let's face it. He turned that ankle there, I believe it was on what game was it? I mean, all these games are just now mashed in my brain that I can't even remember. Actually, it was the game in Cleveland. Fourth quarter where he got rolled up on it, and a lot of people thought, oh, how's this ankle going to respond? And we've seen this 2 years ago on their march to the Super Bowl where he had that bum ankle. I don't think it was the same one. But we saw what happened as he won the first of 2 back-to-back Super Bowls. And now they're going to be on the cusp. Can't say on the cusp, but they have a bye. They're going to have home field. The Super Bowl road goes through Kansas City. And who are you going to think that's going to go into that building and upset Patrick Mahomes? He always finds a way. And this is why the AFC could be a formality when it comes to who's going to get back to the big dance yet again. And everybody has Chief fatigue. Lord knows I do. I'm sick and tired of Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce. We're going to have to see his brother Jason in the suite as well as Taylor Swift. Right, all this is going to be conjured up again when we get to that divisional round playoff game. But yesterday, think about this. After all those games that I mentioned, they played their best game of the year yesterday. Jump out to a 13-0 lead. Pittsburgh, they're flailing there on offense, and then when they get themselves on track, they get a touchdown, which is called back by a holding penalty, and then Russell Wilson throws a pick in the end zone, so he's giving out Christmas gifts to the Chiefs, as he did Saturday in Baltimore. And now the Steelers, again, having to fight uphill. They do get a score to make it 13-7 at the half. Then the Chiefs capitalize on Steeler mistakes, in particular Freiermuth, which I understand the game was already done. It was 22-10 at that point, if you ask me, even though the Steelers did kick a field goal to make it 16-10, but then the touchdown there, I believe that was to Xavier Worthy, and then the fumble by Freiermuth, which led to the game-sealing touchdown, 29-10, and the Steelers were non-competitive. And I'll get to the Steelers in a second. But as far as the Chiefs, they just continue to roll. They continue to go about their business. And yes, when it's all said and done, as the dust is settled in the AFC, the 1 seed and the road to New Orleans has to go through Arrowhead. Is anybody surprised? Is anybody shocked? Is anybody going to even bet against them? Knowing what they've gone through 2 years ago to get to a Super Bowl with the ankle of Mahomes, having to go on the road last year after having that home game, winning on the road in Buffalo, winning on the road in Baltimore before beating the San Francisco 49ers in the Super Bowl. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what more else to add. And they could certainly punt Game 17 and Week 18 to the side and have everybody rest up. And that was without Chris Jones yesterday on defense, I might add. So the Chiefs, let me just put that to rest because I got other things to deal with. Now let me get to my team, the Steelers. And this is a free fall that, can we say we saw it coming? I'm not going to say yes, but knowing that this 3-game gauntlet, going to Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Kansas City was not going to be easy. I thought they would probably lose 2 of the games. If they would have lost all 3, which they did, I would have been a bit surprised, but not in the fashion that they lost these games. In Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts threw the ball all over the lot and dominated time of possession 40 minutes to 20, and the Steelers didn't have a shot. We talked about it Monday in Baltimore. The 2 mistakes by Russell Wilson that certainly did not need to happen. Russell Wilson could have slid there at the goal line. That was fine. And a pick that he threw that generally a rookie throws. Pick 6 to Marlon Humphrey, which was the game when you think about it. And then you have yesterday. Offense stuck in mud. They get George Pickens back. Doesn't make much of a contribution. Had a big catch there. But, all right, big whoop. He did really nothing in the game. Jaylen Warren had some yards on the ground. Fine. But the Steelers defense, again, just all over the place where their defense is just swimming out there, not making big plays. Patrick Mahomes might as well be Tom Brady when he played in New England, how he just destroyed the Steelers defense. And you saw that there again yesterday. And the Steelers have no success against that type of offense, as we've seen time after time after time. And now they got to get their tail between their legs and out of their rear end because they have 1 more game left. And I don't expect the Browns to do the Steelers any favors here when they have to go to Baltimore next Sunday. But as it is right now, the Steelers were 10-3 just not even 3 weeks ago after winning in Cleveland. And this is reminiscent to their 2020 season when they started off 11-0. Remember that, people? They were 11-0. They lose 4 of the last 5 down the stretch, and they had a big comeback against the Colts. And I believe that was on Christmas Eve. Well, maybe that wasn't. Maybe it was a couple days before, where they came back from that deficit against the Colts, won that game before getting blown out in the wild card game against the Browns there that Sunday night. And to me, this is the same type of scenario that I'm watching unfold. But the only difference is the Steelers had a home game in 2020 where now they lost that privilege altogether. And in all likelihood, they're going to have to go on the road to Houston, which I'll get to in a second, and see if they can stay alive to push themselves to another week on whether or not they will survive a wild card round for the first time in forever. Because as you all know, the Steelers have not won a playoff game since 2017 when they beat the aforementioned Kansas City Chiefs. This was prior to Patrick Mahomes, of course, before losing to New England in the AFC Championship game that year. That's how long it's been since they won a playoff game. And now they have to do it on the road. Are they going to get their act together? They're going to have the Bengals come in, which could be a game that the Bengals may need if they beat Denver Saturday afternoon in Cincinnati, because their playoff hopes will still be alive and they have to win that game. They lose that game, they're done. And if they do lose that game, then who knows? Maybe the Steelers will win that game and have any hope to pull off an upset by the Browns there and to bank your season or bank your home field AFC North title hopes on the team that plays 2 hours west of Pittsburgh is asking a lot. So the Steelers, I'm fed up with them right now. Russell Wilson has regressed here. They haven't been able to get the turnovers that they've gotten in the bulk of the season where they've won these games. They've been turning the ball over and haven't capitalized. And boy, we've seen fumbles left and right where they haven't been able to recover. And that's the difference of whether you're going to win or lose. And right now, the Steelers, they have fallen flat on their face here. And they're not going to win a division. It's going to be a miracle if that's going to happen. But right now, all you hope for is next week to win a game, to get into the postseason, which they've already clinched a spot, and hope that if you're going to be ending up going to Houston when it's all said and done, that you have a shot to win that game in the fourth quarter. That's it. As far as the nightcap game, I didn't watch a lot of it. All you need to know about this game, Ravens jump out to a 10-0 lead. They get a safety there by the defensive back, Lassiter, who's a very good player, the rookie, and he tackles Derrick Henry in the end zone. They get the punt, return it 45 yards. They set themselves up in a 1st and goal, and then you have a situation where Joe Mixon couldn't convert there. I believe it was 4th and 3. They had to get to the 1 yard line. 4th and 3, and they weren't able to punch it in, and that was a smart play by D'Amico Ryans. You had to go for a touchdown there. You can't play field goals, because if you get a touchdown to go for 2 there, or even if you don't have to chase points, it's 10-9. The complexion of the game is a lot different. But what happens, they get stuffed there, and then 99 yards the other way, including a big 67-yard pass from Lamar Jackson to Mark Andrews, sets up the touchdown to Isaiah Likely, and from 10-2, it's 17-2, and that's the game. And then you watch Beyonce, and then you could go ahead and watch any Christmas movie or have Christmas dinner, and that's it. Good night, the lights. That's the Raven-Texan game in a nutshell. And now as I talk about the Ravens, and all the buzz, and I touched on this Monday with the MVP candidacy of Lamar Jackson going for a second straight and his third overall. And to me, the only reason why I bring it up, because it's fodder for sports talk. At the end of the day, is anybody really going to care? Now, I'm still going to think that Josh Allen's going to win it for this reason only. If you take Josh Allen off of the Buffalo Bills, I'm just talking about this year only, and you take Lamar Jackson off of the Ravens still have Derrick Henry. And we've seen the type of year that Derrick Henry's had, and another big game for him yesterday. What do the Buffalo Bills have at running back? James Cook, nice running back, solid running back. He is not Derrick Henry who's going to the Hall of Fame. So therefore, if you're going to look at it from that perspective, and I get it that back in week 3, Baltimore eviscerated Buffalo there on a Sunday night. But Buffalo has a better record. Josh Allen has beaten better teams. And Baltimore, when you think about it, if it wasn't for the Steeler collapse, they'd be in second place right now. And I understand we can't go by ifs, but that is the best way to break it down when it comes to the MVP race. And all I'm going to say about this when it comes to Lamar Jackson, and you could go back to Monday's podcast, me discussing how well he's played and how he's matured as a quarterback and how he wants to make more plays with his arm. And his accuracy is still a little bit to be questioned, and his touch has gotten better, but it can sail away from him from time to time. But I will say this about Lamar Jackson, and I've said this a million times, ad nauseum, etc., and I even got into it with Qadry Ishmael, the former Raven wide receiver who won a Super Bowl there for the Ravens back in 2000, a member of that Super Bowl 35 team, and he could troll the Steeler fan and the Steelers all they want, but until Lamar Jackson wins a big game in January or even February, which he has not played in throughout the 8-year career of number 8 in purple and black, until he wins that big game, nobody's going to care how many MVPs he racks up. Because, let me put this into context. If I were to tell you right now that if I gave you another quarterback out there in his career, and I understand this year isn't done yet, and obviously his career is far from over, but let's say he wins the third MVP, and let's say he doesn't get to a Super Bowl. Put that into the equation here. Would you look at his career to this point and take a look at another player's career who was 500, another top pick in an NFL draft many moons ago? Now, I understand Lamar was 32nd, and this one I'm referring to was number 1 overall. Was a 500 quarterback, eligible for the Hall of Fame this year, won 2 Super Bowls, had 2 Super Bowl MVPs, has never come close to sniffing either first-team All-Pro or had won a league MVP. Whose career would you rather have? And I'm not an Eli Manning fan, to say the least. He comes out of the same class, draft class as Ben Roethlisberger. And Roethlisberger in his own right with his 2 Super Bowl rings, but no MVPs. But if you're just a good NFL fan, would you take the career of Eli Manning or take the career of Lamar Jackson to this point? Especially if he wins another MVP. And even if he does win an MVP, he still has 2 on his mantle there. But this is what I mean. He has not won a big game where at least with Eli Manning, we could kill him all we want. Oh, he's a 500 quarterback in the regular season. Oh, other than those 2 playoff runs, he's done nothing. But you can't take those away. You cannot. Where Lamar, we've seen him spit the bit in big spots. And Lamar, as a person, he's a good dude. I got nothing against the guy or his talent. He is fantastic. I can't stand the team. I can't stand the uniform. I call them the Raisins for a reason. But I need to see this in late January and February because the MVPs mean nothing to me. So I'm just going to leave that right there. Now, the last thing when it comes to the coach, he's another person I'm going to be worried about here if I'm a Raven fan because that team is undisciplined and I understand their defense has played better, although I don't trust them in a big spot because it's not the Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs defense of yesteryear. But when the chips are on the line also, and I understand you can say, well, Jay Reels, you won a Super Bowl. Well, Mike Tomlin has been to 2 Super Bowls and won 1, and what has he done for me lately? So Raven fans, sorry, same thing applies here for John Harbaugh. And we saw him melt down last year with his team, undisciplined, all those personal fouls against the Kansas City Chiefs. Lamar Jackson throwing his helmet off after that interception. And I get it, he's frustrated, but that's where you got to pull him by the collar and say, son, we don't do that here. You got to be more composed. The thing is that, and I'm going to be blunt here, the thing with John Harbaugh, he's a player's coach, but he has no asshole in him. He's not the type of guy that's going to ream his own player. He's going to coddle him. He's going to be like the Aaron Boone when it comes to his players. He's not going to hold them accountable. He's got every excuse known to man. Think back to training camp about Lamar Jackson when he was asked about, the AFC Championship game. Oh, well, that's over. Oh, we know Lamar's great, so on and so forth. Yes, we know he's great, but come on. And we get it. He's not going to throw his player under the bus. He's not going to throw him overboard. I understand that. But guess what? Accountability, that matters. So, be that as it may, people, digest that the way you want, but that is a fact. I told you, I got the Grinch ears out today, people. And then lastly, the Houston Texans, I don't want to hear from them anymore. I don't. And I don't want to hear, they beat Buffalo on a Sunday night there in week 5. Well, they also lost to the Jets however many weeks later. And they can't beat a big team to save their lives. And that's not just this year, that's just their whole existence as a franchise. They can never get out of the wild card round. They can never get past the divisional round. They cannot win a big regular season game to save their lives. And yes, we could talk about last year in Indianapolis, but it's the Colts. It's not Peyton Manning. It's not Edgerrin James. It's not Reggie Wayne. No, it's not. So I don't want to hear from the Texan fan, the 5 of you out there outside of Houston that are going to come to me to say, well, hey, CJ Stroud's a good young quarterback, and we have a great young coach, and we have 2 defensive players that are game records, and a good corner in Darryl Stingley Jr. Yes, I understand all that. 100%. But guess what? What have you done? You've done nothing. This is a situation where if you're a Texan fan, if you were in that game, halftime, third quarter, fourth quarter, and you lose a close game, all right, fine. And we've seen they lost close games this year. But they've also spent a bit in big games as well. Sunday night against Detroit when they had a 23-7 lead and they couldn't seal the deal. And I understand they lost a close game in Green Bay. And we could go through the other games that they've lost here down the stretch in Kansas City just 5 days ago. But I've had enough. Texans, I get it. They play in a terrible division, number 1. Number 2, they do have talent. But for me, if they're going to be the cream of the crop, they still need more help. They need some veteran presence. They need players that certainly are going to take them to that next level. And right now, they don't have that. And I get it that they're injured. No Stephon Diggs, no Tank Dell. Understood. But I don't want to hear from Houston. And the thing is, I'm saying this now and watch them go out and slaughter Pittsburgh in the wild card round because Pittsburgh in all likelihood is going to have to go down there to play in the opening weekend, and I'll have to eat my words. But again, we've seen them win wild card games in the past. A la last year when they beat Cleveland. What happened in Baltimore? Yeah, they were hanging around for a half, but in the second half, they got their doors blown off. So the Texans, I don't want to hear from them. Until they get to an AFC Championship game, then we'll talk. If they beat the Steelers in a wild card round, big whoop. Let me see them go on the road as a 4 seed back to Kansas City unless the 5, 6, or 7 seed upsets the apple cart day in the opening round. And then we'll talk. So that's all I got from yesterday's games, etc. I'm just in a terrible mood when it comes to sports. Everything else is quite all right. And I also got to say this. I don't want to pick on this guy, because I think he's a great guy. And many years ago on my former online radio program back in the days, for those who go back with me that far, The Final Word with J Reels and JD, we actually interviewed Nate Burleson. And I got nothing but flowers and bouquets to throw at his feet. But that game yesterday, he was just an atrocity. Overstepping, eyeing eagle. He had not let the game breathe. Coming out, oh, he's open. Oh, there's this. Oh, look at this tackle. I mean, stop. Let Iron Eagle do his job. Nate Burleson, please, if they ever put him back in the booth for a color commentating position, they're doing the fans a disservice. And again, I like Nate Burleson, but if you watched that yesterday and you just heard him, oh, he's open. Oh, that's Travis. Oh, that's this. Enough. Can't stand that. You have your time to shine. You have your time to chime in about a play developing, but don't do it while Iron Eagle's trying to describe the play right in front of us. And I get it, we're watching with our own eyes, but that is his job as a play-by-play guy. Don't overstep him. Oh, my God. So that's what I got as far as the NFL. Now, as far as tonight, Seattle, Chicago, do or die for Seattle. They have to live to see next week in order to play the Rams as we take a look at the schedule here. And the schedule, because, like I said at the very top, they thin out the games here because they have to plug good games in these time frames and days, windows, etc. So, like I mentioned before, Sunday at 1, when you had those list of games where it's like, ooh, what are those matchups? You know they're going to have a good 4:25 matchup. That's a given, leading into primetime. But 1 o'clock, it might as well be a ghost town. It might as well be The Walking Dead. That's how bad the NFL schedule has cannibalized itself. Because when we look at it, and also remember, we have the 3 games on Saturday, as I discussed. So Seattle, Chicago tonight, we know the implications that arise there. Chargers in New England. All right, New England, who knows what they're going to do in the game, but the Chargers, of course, they're a team right now that's trying to solidify their playoff stamp and get themselves qualified into the AFC playoffs. Denver, Cincinnati at 4:30. We already talked about how that game is do or die for the Bengals and for Denver to see if they could somehow, some way get that 6th seed in the AFC, because right now they're the 7th seed because of the tiebreaker that the Chargers have. And then the night game is Arizona at LA, where, as I mentioned, Seattle Thursday night and Arizona, they're done. But let's see if they could sweep the Rams as they beat them in week 2. And the Rams, if they win that game, will set themselves up for a matchup against the Seahawks there a week from this coming Sunday. And then your 1 o'clock slate on Sunday afternoon, you might as well just take a long nap. New York at Buffalo, Las Vegas at New Orleans, Indianapolis at the Giants, who are trying to win a home game this year. Could you imagine? They're 0-8 going into that game. Dallas at Philadelphia, which was flexed out of the 4:25 to get to 1 o'clock. Carolina at Tampa, Tennessee at Jacksonville. Why bother watching? And this is one of the reasons why I said that the NFL is cannibalizing its own sport. Because of the mouths that they have to feed here. Don't even bother watching those 1 o'clock games. You're just wasting your time. I don't care what you're gambling on. If you're gambling Tennessee at Jacksonville, you have a problem, my G's. For real. That's all there is to it. The 4 o'clock game, there's only 2 of them. Miami at Cleveland, again, take a nap. Green Bay, Minnesota, all right. Where does Green Bay stack up against the Vikings? Because the Green Bay Packers, although very good record, and they pitched the first shutout of the NFL season this year by beating New Orleans there on Monday night, and Christian Watson looks like his knee's going to respond well. A lot of people thought that it was feared he could be out for the remainder of the regular season, maybe the postseason, but there is a timetable. Who knows if he's going to come back against the Vikings this week or in the final game against the Bears, but I would think he'll probably make an appearance at some point, so it's not as if he's going to be lost for the season. But Green Bay, Minnesota, where the Packers are going to stack because they've already lost to Minnesota earlier this year. We know that they lost to the Lions twice, as well as losing to the Eagles earlier this year. So pretty much the cream of the crop of the NFC, they haven't been able to beat. And they get one more crack at the Vikings here to see whether or not that they could stack up against them. Because if you ask me, I don't think Green Bay, although talented, but they're not going to have the legs in this postseason to get past the divisional round if they don't play against the big boys and beat the big boys. And I understand it's a regular season, anything can happen in the postseason, but I'm not a believer in Green Bay when you get deep into the playoffs. And then you have Atlanta and Washington, which is a good Sunday night game. Not sexy, it's not a marquee matchup to say the least, but Atlanta, now they put themselves in a position where they control their own destiny, and the Commanders, also the same, knowing that they have the 7th seed right now, and they're trying to fend off the team that's beneath them. Granted that they have a 2-game lead in the conference when it comes to the bottom of the bracket there in the NFC, as I pull up the standings here. But for the Commanders, if they win that game, they'll be in good stead. Now Carolina goes to Tampa, so if they win that game, Atlanta will know by kickoff whether or not they could either, not say they're going to take the pedal off the metal, but they could really put a stranglehold on the division and pretty much clinch the division if Tampa loses and Atlanta wins, because if they end up in a tie, the Falcons have the tiebreaker. So as far as the Commanders go back to them, the Commanders currently in 7th place, where Tampa is right behind them. And the only reason why I bring up Tampa, you could say Seattle as well, but Tampa, because they do have a tiebreaker beating them in week 1. So if they slip and lose on Sunday night to the Falcons and Tampa wins, they'll have a chance to make it in through as a wild card as opposed to winning the division. So that's what you're going to have to keep in mind. And the AFC, I don't want to hear it. I know the Bengals are still alive, and obviously you have a date with Denver there on Saturday. But the Dolphins and the Colts, they're going to need a wing and a prayer. They're both 2 games behind the Broncos as it is right now. Same for the Bengals, but they do inch a little bit closer with the win there on Saturday. And remember, Kansas City has to go to Denver. Now, who suits up for that game remains to be seen. But that's not out of the realm of possibility that the Kansas City Chiefs are just going to automatically lay down for Denver in order for them to get into the playoffs. So just keep that in mind as well. And that's your schedule here for the upcoming tonight, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday night. Your game, I don't even know what the Monday night game is off the top of my head. I'll have to look that up. But the Monday night, which will be the last one of the year, because obviously then you'll have a Week 18 schedule, J-Reels. Detroit and San Francisco. How could I forget? And let's see if San Francisco has any pride, because if Minnesota does beat Green Bay, Detroit's going to have to win just to keep themselves ahead in the division where you have a matchup. Now, it would be a lot of drama if Minnesota won and San Francisco happened to win to beat Detroit, because then it would be a battle for the division there, which I get it. It's not a loser leaves town match, because even if that were to be the case where it's for the division and Minnesota or Detroit will win, both of those teams already clinched a playoff spot. So it's not as if, by chance, if they do lose that game, that's it. They go home for the remainder of the season. So that's what you have with the NFL. And quickly with the college, Carson Beck, the quarterback of Georgia, officially out as he is going to get, or has gotten, Tommy John surgery. So he will not suit up under center there in the playoff game, which I'll talk more on Monday, because the playoff game is New Year's Eve, the 1 there, and then you have the 3 on New Year's Day, a week from yesterday. But so now you're going to have Gunnar Stockton, the backup, come in to start. Again, I'll talk more about Georgia's chances, and we'll talk about all those quarterfinal matchups when we get to them then. I want to move it along here, but that's a big note as far as Carson Beck being out of Georgia, and it certainly is going to hurt their chances of them trying to get back to a title game and winning for the 3rd time in 4 years. And then you also have the Notre Dame lineman, Riley Mills. He's going to be out with a right knee injury. And, of course, it's relative because Notre Dame is going to play Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. So you have 2 key components that are not going to be facing off against one another. Technically, when you think about it, the defensive lineman against the quarterback. So 2 big pieces out for that game there next Wednesday night. And then some sad news. I'll close it out with this. Famed Eagles linebacker Bill Bergey, part of those teams in the late 70s, early 80s, died at the age of 79. I believe he had jaw cancer, and it cropped up in 2021, succumbed to it, I believe, just a couple days ago. So thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to Bergey. Very good player, very popular player in Philadelphia, and played on the 81 Super Bowl team that lost to the Oakland Raiders. So for Bergey, thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to the Eagle family, the NFL, etc. All right, now let me turn my attention as I lace up the high tops and go through the NBA. And I'm still going to have my Scrooge ears and whiskers, etc., because I got some things to talk about here with the association. And although it was swallowed up by the NFL yesterday, even though the games were terrible, but here's what I'm going to take away. I'm not going to go game by game because I wasn't in tune to every game throughout the course of the afternoon. Obviously, with the Spurs and Knicks, I know that started before the Chiefs-Steeler game, but once the Chiefs-Steelers started, I was off it. And even though Victor Wembanyama had a 42-point performance in Madison Square Garden, I believe that's the most by a rookie player that's played on Christmas Day, but he scored his last point with about 7:40 to go in the game. So he was not impactful down the stretch to where the Spurs lost at MSG yesterday. And big ups to Mikal Bridges with 41 points, had a big day from the field as the Knicks prevail and inch that much closer to the Celtics, which I'll get to in a second. But the second game, Minnesota-Dallas, the Mavericks had to overcome the injury of Luka Doncic, which could be lengthy because this calf injury that he suffered, we got to check the MRI, but it could be a time before we see Luka come back, and he's already been out with wrist injuries, and he just came back from a 2-game absence because of a right heel contusion, so now he's out with this calf. So who knows what that's going to mean for the Mavericks moving forward. We'll have to wait and see, but Kyrie, trying to be heroic after a 28-point deficit, was overcome and was ready to take the lead with a 3 there late in the game, which came short. But with Anthony Edwards, 26 points, and the T-Wolves were able to survive that rematch of the Western Conference Final there yesterday down in Big D, where the T-Wolves prevailed. there in Dallas. And then Celtics. I've watched the Celtics here and there. I haven't been so tuned into them. Obviously been wrapped up in the football, the college football. Of course, I've been paying attention. I watch when I watch. But that was a bad loss for the Celtics there yesterday. And also the flip side is just going to propel the Sixers here to get out of this early season malaise. Maybe I'll start with them. Sixers, we've talked about this time after time, between Embiid fighting with the reporter at the beginning of the year, him being out with the injuries, as well as Tyrese Maxey, as well as Paul George, Jared McCain, go on down the list. And Monday night was a strange one because the refs were on Victor Wembanyama's side where he was flopping all over the court. Joel Embiid gets ejected. Andre Drummond gets ejected before it was rescinded. I mean, it was just a mess there. But even then, the Sixers still prevailed in a victory there against San Antonio on Monday. And then fast forward to yesterday, Caleb Martin, and I understand why the Sixers got him, he is a mere mortal against the rest of the NBA. But when he sees the green and white, forget about it. It is just like he's an all-NBA player. And don't you think Joe Mazzulla and company has tried to figure this kid out? 8 from 11 from the field, 7 from 9 from 3, 23 points. Obviously a huge contribution there. Joel Embiid had 27. Tyrese Maxey had a big game, 33 and 12 in his own right. They just ran away from the Celtics there in that fourth quarter, thanks to 4 threes by Caleb Martin, I might add. But enough. Why haven't the Celtics learned when it comes to Caleb Martin is beyond me. But the Celtics are 22-8 right now. All right, nobody's going to cry about their record, but there seems to be something a little bit off. I know Kristaps Porzingis, now you got to wonder about him as he tweaked his ankle there at the top of the three-point circle. And now you have to wonder whether he's going to be out for 2 months because you know he's made out of plastic. And I'm talking about my own player in Kristaps Porzingis. But again, that guy can't stay healthy if his life depended on it. So now let's see if that's day-to-day, if he's going to be out a week, 2 weeks, whatever. But the Celtics, that's a bad loss. Sixers are reeling. I get it. They got a win there on Monday night. But for all intents and purposes, that's a team they should have disposed. And they didn't. And kudos to the Sixers. Give it up for what they've done as they beat the Celtics in Boston there yesterday. And then you had Lakers-Warriors, another Curry-LeBron rematch, as we've seen many Christmas in the past. And you had LeBron with 31 points, 10 assists. And I know Anthony Davis, talk about a guy you got to wonder from one day to the next, his health. He also turned an ankle late there in the first quarter. He had to leave the game, did not return. So LeBron had to pick up the slack. But Austin Reaves was the hero, a triple-double, 26, 10, and 10, I believe, including the game-winning bucket. This is based off the heroics from Steph Curry, where the Lakers were up by 9 with a minute and a half to go and up by 4 with about 22 seconds to go before a prayer 3 by Steph in the corner, where I believe he had a double pump off the top of my head watching the replay and the highlights again. And then after making 1 or 2 free throws, I believe both free throws are made. He made the 3. I think it was at that point, it was 111, 107, 111, 110. 2 free throws were made at 113, 110. And then Curry makes a 3 from the other side of the bay to make it 113 up. But then Austin Reaves breaks the dribble off of Andrew Wiggins, who's supposed to be a good defender, to the basket, gets the layup, and then a prayer 3 by Curry goes awry as the Lakers get out of San Francisco with a victory there. And the Warriors, who have been scuffling here as of late, tough loss for them, even after that valiant comeback there in the last minute and a half. But Austin Reaves saves the day as the Lakers win. And I did not watch a second of Denver-Phoenix. I know the Suns won. And for Kevin Durant and company, this is without Devin Booker, who didn't play in the game. But I know he and Bradley Beal had big games. And the Suns went on to beat the Nuggets there one more time. I didn't watch a second of it. At that point, I was watching a Christmas movie with the wife. I said, I had enough. Between the Steelers losing, the Celtics losing, the Ravens winning, my Christmas was just fine and dandy, to say the least, which is the reason why I'm acting like a Grinch today. So if you're watching there on YouTube, you can see my expressions and my facial reaction as, yes, I'm still bitter the day after of witnessing, just as bad of a sports day as yours truly could ever have. Other than that, you didn't have much. You had the games yesterday, Monday, the situation there with the Wembanyama, who all of a sudden now is getting calls by the refs and flops, I might add, which that's another story. But we'll talk more about the NBA there on Monday. Let's take a look at the schedule. And I also want to get to Jimmy Butler, too, as I talked about that last week, where he did not demand or request a trade, but he certainly would prefer a trade out of Miami, ready to jump away from the sinking ship. Miami, who is floundering around 500 and looks like they're not going to go anywhere here in an Eastern Conference, despite the fact of heat culture, Spoelstra, etc. But for the schedule here the rest of the way up until Monday, tonight, Oklahoma City, Indiana. Miami's in Orlando. Let's see. Tomorrow, the Knicks are in Orlando. Good game there. Indiana at Boston. San Antonio still in town. They're playing Brooklyn tomorrow night. So for those who want to see Wembanyama, I'm sure there's plenty of tickets available there on Barclays Center. I know, still throwing spice out there. Cleveland at Denver. Dallas at Phoenix. Warriors in LA to play the Clippers. And then you have Saturday. Nothing really to get into. Phoenix at Golden State. Sacramento at the Lakers. And then Sunday, Indiana at Boston. Miami at Houston. Memphis at OKC. San Antonio at Minnesota. So those are your games that of note from now until Monday when we reconnect. And then you also have Jimmy Butler, where he has a handful of teams you want to go to. Mainly Golden State, Phoenix, Denver, the teams that want to win. I think there's another team you could throw in there. I think Houston was another team. I guess he'd want to mentor the young guys on the team. I don't know if that would be a good fit because you have to match the work ethic of a one Jimmy Butler. But are the Heat going to honor and grant the wishes of a one Jimmy Butler? That remains to be seen. I don't know with the money that's going to be owed to him. I believe he's owed a little bit more. He's $49 million this year, whatever is left on the contract this year. He does have a player option next year, which is going to exercise and become a free agent. So whichever team's going to get him is going to get him as a rental. So I don't know how much the Heat are going to get in return unless they can work out a sign and trade. And I don't even know if that's plausible during the middle of the year in order for them to get anything substantial back, because the only way that the Heat are going to get any type of talent and capital back is if they get that sign and trade or have a guarantee to wherever Butler were to go to that he could sign an extension, get his money, so therefore that he could get back whether it's picks or players that they could insert into their lineup. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move this along, and I won't talk about it any further until he does, if and when he does get traded. And who knows, you may not see that until the All-Star break, as the Heat are still trying to figure out their team here. And when we look at the standings, they're currently in the top 6 in the Eastern Conference. They're just a half game ahead of the Atlanta Hawks and the Pacers as we speak, but they are 500, 14-13. I picked them as an under this year specifically because of that, because I thought they were going to be floundering around 500, and so far so good with that pick, because as we all know, my over-unders, whether it's the NFL, NBA, or NHL, they have been an abomination. But the Cavaliers, now with a 4-game lead in the Eastern Conference, again, we're not even at the halfway point, but that is a good lead, a lead at arm's length in the Celtics, which is important there when you get to the spring into the summer, and there's still a lot of basketball to be played, but the Knicks are actually closer to the Celtics than the Celtics are to the Cavaliers, so keep that in mind, as the Knicks are just 2 games behind the Celtics in the standings there in the East. And then out west, OKC is still running there at the top, 4 games in the loss, 3.5 over the Rockets, 4 games in front of the Grizzlies, 5 in the loss. And then you have Dallas, Denver, LA, Lakers that is, followed by the Clippers, who although have the same record, but LA is currently 7th. Phoenix, who were 11th on Monday, now have catapulted themselves to 8th in the conference. Obviously, the slimmest of margins there between the 5 seed and the 10 seed. And as I said before, and I'll say one more time, I'm sure the NBA right now, after Christmas, I'm sure they're asking Santa for a late Christmas gift to arrive in April for Victor Wembanyama to be in the postseason, because that would be a boon for the league to have a young player with that stature, and maybe the guy that could carry the torch once LeBron, once Steph, once KD. I get it, you still have Jason Tatum and Anthony Edwards and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the like, but Wembanyama, who is younger than those players, could be the guy and maybe the face of a franchise down the road. And it'll be interesting, because a face of the league, not just the franchise, but the face of the league, could be a foreign player. Is the NBA ready for that? Think about that and keep that receipt for later on down the road. Now let me lace up my skates for the NHL, and not much to discuss here. I know you had games there on Monday. They've been off Tuesday, Wednesday, yesterday, today, before they reconvene there tomorrow. So the only thing that I have of note as of right this very second, the Red Wings fired their head coach, Derek Lalonde, as you hear the puppy there barking in the background. Derek Lalonde, they bring in Todd McClellan as coach, the former San Jose Shark coach, if I'm not mistaken. And Lalonde, I get it. The Red Wings had to do something. They came into this year with some promise. They came into this year with some hope. And they have certainly underachieved. So there was a shakeup there in the Motor City. Not a good Christmas there for the Lalonde family. So let's see if Tom McClellan can pick up the pieces and get the Red Wings on track to see whether or not that they're going to have any type of hopes to make it into the postseason, which they haven't been in the playoffs in a long time. And that's an original six proud organization franchise. So for them to not be in the playoffs over the last, whatever it is, half dozen years or in and out of the postseason, and again, more out than in, let's see if he's going to be able to turn the tide there in the Motor City to get the Red Wings back on track. But you have that. You also have the Rangers who are flailing. And I've talked about them over the last couple of weeks with the trades that they've made. Jacob Trouba out, as well as there was another trade that was made. I know they re-signed the goaltender to one, Igor Shesterkin, but they also traded Capo Caco. Thank you very much. They got him out of there, the number 2 overall pick, who certainly was not anything close to being the number 2 top overall pick in the draft after Jack Hughes there back in 2019. So he was jettisoned, and now you have a scenario where could Chris Kreider be next? A guy who had a healthy stretch against the Devils, where the Devils just annihilated the Rangers there on Monday, out in Prudential Center at the Rock. So now with him being a healthy scratch, is Chris Kreider the writing on the wall for him to be out, considering that 33 years of age, long in the tooth? I know he's still a productive player. He has 11 goals, only 1 assist. Not that he's a playmaker in that regard, but is he going to be another guy that's going to be out of here before you know it? Chris Drury's had a quick trigger finger. I don't know if that's coming from James Dolan or the powers that be, but right now, the Rangers, who got up to that great start and now have lost 13 of the last 17, inexplicably have just gone south. And could it get any worse? I guess it could. But let's see what's going to happen there at the Garden, as the Rangers are certainly have collapsed in their own right. And then, speaking of which, the Sabres, a team that has just cratered. Talked about this on Monday. Lost 13 in a row heading into the matchup against the Islanders there on Long Island there, where during this 13-game losing streak, the Islanders shut out the Sabres. So what happens? The Sabres snapped their streak. All right, they did, no problem. They were bound to win a game at some point. What did they do? Did they win in an overtime shootout? Because the Islanders have had a ton of these games where they have, I believe, 7 overtime shootout losses in which they've gained a point. Or, all right, what was it, a 4-2 game? They got an empty netter late. The Sabres blew the Islanders out 7-1. All of a sudden, the Sabres look like the 99 team that went to a cup final under Dominic Hasek and company. So the Sabres, they snapped it in just overwhelming fashion to the point where the Islanders are now on the side of a road somewhere as carcass over the last 3 days. And they are a team that certainly aren't going anywhere fast. Even with Patrick Roy, I don't know if the bloom is off that rose. Not to say that he came in like gangbusters, and I like that hire if you ask me. But the Islanders don't really have the talent. They're not keeping up with the Joneses and the rest of the conference. They automatically think that, all right, our little core of Marty Barzal and Anders Lee and Brock Nelson and J.P. Pajot and did I say that right? J.G. Pajot. Let me get it straight here, people. Kyle Palmieri and even the young goaltender, Ilya Sorokin, who's gone backwards this year. I mean, the team is just another just putrid, just awful team. They're miring at the bottom of the Metropolitan Division with the Rangers of all teams. Could you imagine? Yes, I could. Because the Islanders, for whatever reason, Lou Lamoriello and company, they don't seem to bring in the reinforcements when they need to. And that's why they've just been bad. Yes, they made it into the postseason the last couple of years, but what? As a 7 seed last year and a wild card and an 8 seed as a wild card the year before, and what did that get them? First round exits to the Carolina Hurricanes. Man, I am just in a peachy mood today. Can you tell? I don't know what else more to say, people. I don't. I guess we could talk about, how about the kid Matt Rempe? 8-game suspension for hitting the Stars defensive player, what's his name, Miro Heiskanen. And he got 8 games. I understand a lot of people are outraged. Wow, 8 games? I can't believe that. Well, he got 4 games last year for elbowing Jonas Siegenthaler, the Devil forward, and got 4 games then. So this is a repeat offender. He's going to get 8. Maybe should have gotten 6. 8 is too strong. But because he is a tough guy, I'm sure if he was one of these scrappy wingers who couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper bag, he probably would have gotten 6 games. And originally, he probably would have gotten 2 games last year if that would have happened to that type of player. But because he's 6'7", he's an enforcer, he's a guy that I understand that's mainly his job. People are going to frown upon that. You know I'm not going to. I'm always going to rep the tough guy, even if he is a New York Ranger and I can't stand them. But he got 8 games because his one job is to pretty much be the enforcer and the policeman out there on the ice, and does a good job of it. Granted that he is built like a giraffe, but with that being said, that's why he got his 8 games. So if you're wondering, oh, that's too much, I can't believe that, hey, why? Well, that's why. David Pastrnak, upper body injury, that's going to hurt the Bruins here as they try to, of course, stay afloat there in the Atlantic Division, which is very competitive. And give it up for Sidney Crosby, who matched Mario Lemieux for all-time career assist leader, not only just for the organization, but all-time, 1,033. Kudos to him. We know how great Sid the Kid is. He's not a kid anymore. He's actually a gentleman at this point. But for Crosby, congratulations to him as he matches his boss's record of assists, not only by the franchise, but also on the all-time assist list in NHL history. And I believe there's 12 players ahead of him all time, so it just goes to show you how, although attaining that achievement, still there are plenty of people ahead of him, even though he's got more than 1,000 assists. But with the standings overall, it's pretty much going to be the same as I said Monday. I know there were a bunch of games there on the docket, but what more can I tell you? Florida and Toronto with the Bruins separated by 4 points there at the top of the Atlantic. 2 points behind them are Tampa. Devils, although the teams in the division, unlike the Penguins, 1 game in hand, but a lot of teams in the division have 3 games in hand. A point ahead of the Capitals there in the Atlantic, where Carolina is 5 points behind Washington. Out west, Winnipeg, 5 points ahead of the Minnesota Wild and 4 points ahead of Colorado. In that division, Dallas is 2 points behind the Avalanche there. And then the Vegas Golden Knights, 5 points ahead of Edmonton, a point over the Kings, and 2 points ahead of Vancouver there for the Pacific Division. And that's your NHL right out the bat. And then lastly, I'm just going to wrap up with this. Baseball, hot stove free agency will probably cool off here a little bit. Obviously, we talked about all these moves here over the last couple of weeks. And we know who the big players are that are left that are of note. Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman, Corbin Burnes, Jack Flaherty, if you want to throw him out there, Teoscar Hernandez, Jeff Hoffman, the reliever there from the Philadelphia Phillies, Hai-Sung Kim, the infielder from the San Diego Padres, Anthony Santander, the outfielder from Baltimore, Tanner Scott, paging New York Mets, David Stearns, hello, we need a reliever in the worst way, and a lefty reliever at that. All right, you said you want to spend money, you got to pay some big-time money for a lefty reliever. Let's go, let's get cracking. Gleyber Torres, I got to throw him in there because that's a guy of note and of name. Those are the big guys that are out there. I don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the year. Maybe one of these guys get plucked and signed. But when we get into January, who knows? Because we've seen how stubborn the players can be, more so the agents, because they want to get the big deal. But this bleeds into the middle of January where nobody cares because everybody's wrapped up in the NFL. And then you get to February where you have the 2-week period for the Super Bowl. And then with pitchers and catchers reporting shortly thereafter, whomever raises the Lombardi Trophy there in New Orleans that second Sunday of February, or maybe it's the first Sunday this year. I got to look back on that. But you get my drift. Then you're going to have these aforementioned players, if they're not signing on the dotted line, you're going to get a scenario where a lot of these guys are going to sign 1-year deals to show and prove themselves for hopefully a bigger payday in 2025. And that's going to be the script here if these guys don't get signed between now and I'll say the end of the NFL regular season. So that's January 5th. Because once you get past that, baseball is going to be off in the wilderness. It's not going to be in anybody's consciousness. Everybody's going to be wrapped up not only in the NFL, but in college football. So let's see if anything's going to happen here. I don't know. I couldn't tell you if these guys haven't been signed to this point. Who knows? This may drag on into January, maybe even into February for that matter. So that's the lay of the baseball landscape there. And I'll leave you with this. Because I've taken a shot at my Mets, and people will say, what, Jay Reels taking a shot at the Mets? You signed Juan Soto. You've signed a few pitchers here. You've done some things here, which I'm sure you got to be proud about, right? Well, I'm just going to leave you with this, okay? And then I will say goodbye, and we'll reconnect on Monday, and it'll be all coconuts and palm trees at that time. So here we go. I know on Monday I talked about Walker Buehler signing with the Red Sox, 1 year, $21 million deal. And yeah, I was on my high horse then. I'm just going to wrap it up by saying this. Because for those who have been adding me, oh, well, listen, we got Frankie Montas, who has an opt-out after this year, $17 million. Jay Reels, no big whoop. All right, Griffin Canning, 25 and 34 lifetime with a 4.76 ERA, coming from an organization that needs pitching in the worst way. And he signs with the Mets. It's only $4 million for 1 year. Big whoop. Do the math, people. Take Frankie Montas' $17 million. You take Griffin Canning's $4 million. Add that up. What do you get? $21 million. That could have paid Walker Buehler's salary for 2025. A guy who just came off of beating the Mets in a NLCS. Granted, he didn't get the victory in that game, game 4 that is, where he pitched 4 innings, and although threw 90 pitches, but was gutty and showed you that he's a guy that no matter how the pressure may mount is going to deliver and come through. What did you see in the World Series? Pitched in a Game 3 to victory, got the save to wrap up the World Series just 2 days later, and you mean to tell me that Griffin Canning and Frankie Montas combined is better than Walker Buehler? I'm waiting. Still waiting. That, my friends, he is not. And that's why I wanted Walker Buehler on the team. Sean Manaea, okay, fine. You need a lefty starter. One more time, David Stearns, Steve Cohen, if you're listening, Tanner Scott is out there. And I'm not trying to make Tanner Scott out to be Randy Myers, circa Nasty Boys, 1990. If you don't know who he is, look him up. I'm not trying to make him out to be B.J. Ryan, Baltimore Orioles, even Toronto, which he was a bust. He flamed out in Toronto. Look him up. Talk about all the great lefty relievers out there. Tanner Scott is a guy that the Mets need. They do not have a lefty coming out of the bullpen. David Peterson, And yes, let's go back to that rotation. You already have Kodai Senga. You already have David Peterson. You already have Tyler McGill. You already have Manaea, who's part of the mix. Clay Holmes is going to be a starter. I'd rather trade Frankie Montas and Griffin Canning to Boston. I'll drive into Boston to bring Walker Buehler back. And therefore, that is the end of this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, people. This was one for the books. This was one I can't remember from start to finish, me being this spicy, this Grinchy, Scroogey, whatever you want to call it. But guess what? Was I off base? Was I out of character? Was I saying anything that was outlandish? I don't think so. Yes, it isn't my opinion. My opinion only. And we know opinions are like you-know-whats. I said it earlier in the show, and I'll say it one more time. They're like assholes. But that's why you can't have a podcast, you can't have a talk show, you can't have a show like this and just be bland and just be vanilla and not be entertaining and not be informative and not be on top of things, which is what yours truly is doing. And that's why I thank you for carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is to have to say about what goes on in this wonderful toy department of life called sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I greatly appreciate it. Go to the YouTube channel at JReels, which you'll see it up there. Also the video on Spotify, so you definitely don't want to miss out. But the YouTube channel, I have more content coming through, not just sports, I get it. This is a sports podcast, and a lot of it is tailored to that. But I also have some lifestyle content, year-end stuff that I'm going to post. So you definitely want to stay tuned to that. A little inspirational, a little motivational, a little perspective about life, because yes, there is more to life than just sports, people. And I know coming from me, that it could be rough at times because everybody knows how I feel about talking what it is about that I love. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the following. Of course, YouTube at JReels, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JReels Podcast, Twitter, JReels1, just the number, or the old-fashioned way to JReelsPodcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, or if you couldn't take a guess, or just a pulse of what has transpired over the last hour, This is what I love to do, people. This is why I quit my job to pursue this, because it's in the blood. It's in the DNA since birth. Talking sports, watching sports, following sports. I can't get enough of it. And one more time, if you couldn't tell by what I've been able to spew over the last 60 minutes plus, then either you're not paying attention or you're not really listening, or you're just going to have to come back. Because as long as I'm sitting in front of this camera and as long as I'm in front of this microphone, I will deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything. That happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the J Reels podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the J Reels podcast, on the flip, baby.